Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Turchin with Zypro Technology. I'm the Chief Product Officer and Chief Information Security Officer at Zypro. And today we're going to be talking about protecting your applications with multi-factor authentication. This is a new approach than our standard multi-factor authentication for your operating system and your platform. Now we're going to be moving into the realm of the applications that actually run on your platform, some of your custom applications and legacy applications, and how you can protect those with the same type of multi-factor authentication that you're used to. Now, excuse me if I stumble around this. We're all getting used to this new virtual presentation style, so apologies in advance, but I'll try and go as smooth as I can. So a little bit about Zypro. We've been around in the mission critical security space for quite a while now. We're headquartered in Simi Valley, California, just outside of Los Angeles, where it's almost 100 degrees today. We've got expertise in HPE nonstop cybersecurity. We focus on compliance, we focus on risk management, and we've added database management products to our portfolio, which we'll touch on in a few minutes. We've also got a globally distributed sales support and services organization. So no matter where you are in the world, we've got folks in your time zone ready to help and assist. And we've got a very, very strong partnership with HPE. As we'll talk about in a few minutes, a couple of our products come shipped as part of the operating system, which allow you to extend some of the operating system's capabilities. So some of the new things that Zypro has been doing over the last year or so, obviously HPE Hewlett Packard Enterprise being our largest partner, but we've also recently added new partnerships to our portfolio. SailPoint, who is the market leader in identity and access management solutions. So if you want to integrate your IAM processes with Nonstop, we've got a partnership and solutions for that. In fact, our integration with SailPoint is the only SailPoint certified integration for Nonstop. So if you won't need to integrate Nonstop and SailPoint, we're the people that can help you. Similarly, we've got integrations with CyberArk. CyberArk, again, is a market leader in enterprise privilege access management and enterprise vault solutions. So again, if you need to integrate CyberArk with your Nonstop, please come and see us. Some of the newer partnerships that we've got, we've recently set up a partnership with ServiceNow. ServiceNow is, you'll find it in most enterprise environments, is a workflow management and change control system. So you would typically put a change control ticket within ServiceNow and all actions need to be validated against that. We've got an integration between Nonstop and ServiceNow. And some of our other partnerships that have always been there, RSA, obviously, Optiv, which is a solutions integrator when it comes to SailPoint and CyberArk. And if there are additional integrations in your environment that you need to bring Nonstop into the picture, please come talk to us. If we don't have a solution right now, we're probably working on something in the background. So let's just jump into the meat of the presentation. We're all used to, it's been about 3 months now, we're all used to working from home. And as such, criminals are aware that we've lost the air cover that our office environment would bring us. So phishing scams have increased. And why have they increased? Because they know we've lost that air cover. They know that we've lost the protection that our office brings, that the perimeter brings, that the firewalls and all of the protections that we've got in play at the office are almost are no longer there. Or for the most part, they've been ratcheted back a little bit. And you take people who are not used to working outside of the office and put them in a home environment where they have to juggle kids and spouses and all kinds of other responsibilities from home. Most people get a little uncomfortable in that situation and can get panicky. And attackers know this. This is what they're preying on. They're preying on the fear and the chaos and the panic of people who don't traditionally work from home, working from home in that type of chaotic environment. So they're banking on you're going to be able to make mistakes. So if they can send you phishing scams, targeting or making it look like legitimate emails from your HR department or the IRS or the World Health Organization, or even the student loan scams that we're seeing right now about restructuring your student loan debt. there's a lot of people that are actually wanting to do this. They want to communicate with the IRS. They want to communicate with their bank or their mortgage lender or their student loan administrators. But these phishing criminals are sending messages that look exactly like legitimate emails, and with the chance that they're hoping that you click on one of these and they can compromise your system, and from your system, not just compromise your system, but compromise your work network. So everybody's awareness and needs to be at its highest level right now, because they're trying to take advantage of everything that they can. And why is phishing so popular as an attack vector? Well, it's easy to execute. All you've got to do is load up an email list and a mass mailer and send it out to 1 million people. And even if you get 1% to respond, that's 10,000 email addresses or 10,000 responses out of 1 million. That's a pretty good return on investment. It's inexpensive. You can go on the dark web, use your Tor browser, get onto the dark web, and start buying email lists, valid email lists with the credentials sometimes attached to them for pennies. I saw one place and was selling a list of 5 million users for $10, or the equivalent of $10 of Bitcoin, which is almost nothing. And they're successful. Like I said, even if you get 1%, even if you get 0.5% to respond out of 1 million emails you send out, that's a pretty good return on investment. I found this to be an interesting statistic too, is this company ran a phishing test between September 2018 and 2019. 26% of all recipients that received this malicious email clicked on a link within that email. Now, I'm sure your organization runs these phishing tests, and sometimes you'll see the results from them. That's pretty standard. That number is not shocking. It is shocking because it's so high, but it's not shocking because it's not out of the ordinary. This is kind of the mean in most environments that I've seen. And this is why this keeps happening, is because they are getting success. Even if they get 1 or 2 of you to click, it proves successful to them, and it's cheap. What are they targeting when they do this? They're targeting credentials. Credentials are the easiest way to compromise a system. So why is it that credentials are still in 2020 the biggest attack vector? It's because security best practices are not being followed. If an attacker, think about your house, if an attacker can walk up to your front door, insert a key into your lock, open a door, and walk right in, why would they do anything different? Why would they go through any additional effort to do anything more difficult? Credentials, improper credentials, and getting access to those credentials works the exact same way. So when we think about these hackers, they're not like you would see on the movies with 20 computer screens banging away on a keyboard with lines and lines of green source code scrolling by the screen and all kinds of interesting sounds coming out of the computer that you've never heard before. That's not what a hacker is. A hacker is essentially somebody that can figure out how to compromise your credentials. The easiest way is phishing. What happens during a phishing attack is you'll get an email, like I said, that looks legitimate, hoping that you'll click on the link. Once you click on the link, that's when the game starts. You click on the link without you even knowing, something gets installed on your computer. This is typically, this can typically be a screen scraper or a keylogger or some sort of remote backdoor, some way that they can access your system remotely. In more extreme cases, but they're becoming more and more common, ransomware is a big concern. But we're going to talk about those keyloggers, those screen scrapers, those command and control backdoors that are typically what would happen when you click on a phishing email. So you click on these and you get a keylogger installed on your computer. Now, every system, everything you log into, they've got a record of, because you're logging into your bank website, you're logging into your Works VPN. Once you're logged into your Works VPN, you're logging into systems inside of your Works VPN. So everything is probably protected with a username and password. They have access to that username and password. A lot of the times recently I'm seeing as well is when you're working from home, a lot of users have all these different username and passwords or credentials that they need to manage. Typically in an office environment, again, you would have an enterprise password vault where your credentials are stored. I've seen a lot of this recently, is people have password.txt or password.xls on their desktop You open that up and it's got personal passwords in there, it's got work passwords in there, and they're using a flat text file or an Excel file as password management. If I compromise the system, that's the first thing I'm going over after, is I can go into the desktop, I can go into my documents folder and see if you've got anything called password.xls or password.txt. Don't worry about changing it to something cute either, the file name to something cute either. They'll find it. So they'll be able to, there's technology out there that quickly identify if credentials are stored inside of a flat file. Once they have those credentials, they've got the keys to the kingdom. They can move around and do whatever they need to do without anybody even being aware that that's the case. So in some interesting statistics, a study of 905 attacks, 91 of them were after user credentials. Again, if you can walk in through the front door, why would you make your life any more difficult as a hacker? So talking about the current state of cybersecurity, these are from the IBM 2019 Cost of Data Breach report from last year, talking about the mean time to identify a data breach is 7 months. That means somebody's in your network, on your systems, doing things that you don't know that they're doing, that they shouldn't be doing for nearly 7 months before they're detected. And it takes another 4 months before that breach is contained. So in total, on average, they're spending almost a year in your network, on your systems, in your applications, doing whatever they want before they're kicked out. On the higher end of the spectrum, there's participants in this report that were breached for 4 years before they realized that they were breached. Think about the Marriott hack we've been hearing about earlier this year and late last year, where going back now and going through their audits and forensic records, they can see that they were breached all the way back in 2014. 2014. That's almost 5 years by the time that they were able to detect the breach and contain the breach. And every day now, we're getting more and more information still about the impacts of the breach, what they really access, if that's even being contained. And here's another scary number, talking about almost $4 million is the average cost of a data breach. And this is, think about it, this is the reputation damage, this is the remediation activity, this is the recovery, this is loss of customers. And in some cases, a lot of companies cannot recover from a data breach. Most of them go under when something like this happens. Again, these are average numbers. If you look at some of the, as you scale up the size of your company, it's going to get larger and larger. Here's another rather recent type of attack that's targeting credentials. This is one that's called credential stuffing. So this is where attackers or hackers can access online password dumps from companies that were breached years and years ago. Think about the Yahoo breach. Think about the Under Armour breach. Think about all these mega breaches we've heard of over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Those passwords are still floating around the dark web. Again, you can use your dark web browser, go into the dark web, and buy these lists for pennies on the dollar. You can buy multiple lists, multiple large lists with millions of username and passwords in there. And just try this method called credential stuffing. And what this does is it takes one of those lists and it tries to target every website that people commonly use. Banking websites, work websites, VPN websites, you name it. Wherever most people would commonly have a username and a password, this credential stuffing method would take that list and try those credentials on various websites. What they're hoping would happen is people are very slow or sometimes don't even change their passwords. So Yahoo, for example, got breached back in 2014, 2015. There's a lot of passwords in that password list that are still valid. I kid you not. And that's what they're banking on, is those username password combinations are still valid. This also gets a little clever because they can take that password, and most people use the same password from website to website to website, even though their username might change. So that website password or that Yahoo password that was in that password list might be the same password to log into your work VPN or some other location. So at the end of the day, they're going to figure out how to get in, and we're making their job way too easy by improperly using passwords. That's the root of this whole thing. That's the crux of this conversation, is passwords are our weakest link at this point. We're in 2020. We've got to move beyond just using username and password to authenticate ourselves to a system or an application. And again, it's talking about, here's more statistics talking about improperly storing passwords. So it's not just bad enough that we're using weak or insecure passwords, but add to that we're improperly storing them, again, in that password.xls file or a password.txt file. There's a solution that exists that can take care of all of this. That's called multi-factor authentication, which we're going to spend the rest of the presentation talking about. But it blows my mind how many people do not have this applied, not just in their work environments, but in their home environments, in their personal lives as well. Multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication is critical to have in every aspect of your life, from your work to your personal, to your kids, to everywhere that you can turn it on, it needs to be turned on. I've got a lot of smart devices at home. I've got a Nest thermostat, I've got a Ring doorbell, I've got Wemo light switches, I've got, you name the gadget, and I've probably got it. I've turned on multi-factor authentication for everything. The last thing I want is, for example, my Nest account to be compromised and then somebody turning on and being able to mess with my thermostat remotely, or access my security cameras remotely, or start playing with my light switches remotely. That's where two-factor authentication on a smaller scale, maybe less impactful, but still important to do, applies. On a larger scale, without multi-factor authentication, somebody can compromise your, for example, your work email, and imagine what kind of damage it can do from there. Okay, so let's jump into what is multi-factor authentication. So we're all used to the traditional username and password combination that we would use to log into anything. And all that's doing is proving to the system that we're trying to log into that we are who we say we are, because we're the only ones who should know that username and password combination. But again, talking about over the last 10 minutes, how easy it is for somebody to compromise that username and password and pretend they're us. So username and password no longer sustainable. Multi-factor authentication means adding a second factor to that authentication process. Typically, you've got three types of authentication factors. You've got something you know, this is your password, because you're supposed to be the only one who knows your password. Something you are, this is a fingerprint, this is a biometric scan, this is a face ID, for example, and something you have. This can be a token, this can be a smart card, this can be your RSA key fob, something like that. So what multi-factor authentication is using at least two of these methods before you can authenticate to a system. Imagine what that means. I've got a username and password that I would log into my email, for example. I put in my username and password, and I'm logged in. With multi-factor authentication turned on, I've got to put in my username and password, and then I've got to pull out my RSA key fob, for example, and put in the number that's in my key fob. So that's something I have. Nobody else in the world has that key fob and will have that number at the same time. So even if my username and password get compromised and somebody can take it and log in, they won't have that key fob, so they won't be able to authenticate. Biometrics is another good one. Again, your Face ID, for example. I'll pick up my iPhone. Well, not anymore because everybody's wearing face masks, but typically you would pick up your iPhone and it would unlock just by taking a scan of your face. But in corporate environments, we've seen fingerprint scans, or in more secure environments, retinal scans or other types of biometric authentication. So anyway, good multi-factor authentication requires at least two of these. Now we're seeing even some cases where 3 factors are being required. So it's not just good enough to present username, password, plus an RSA key fob or a key token. Now they're also requiring some sort of biometric scan on top of that. Multi-factor is required for a lot of compliance frameworks, PCI DSS being the most popular. PCI DSS requirement 8.3 requires multi-factor authentication for all personnel with non-console admin access to the card data environment. So again, previously, you could use multi-factor authentication to log into the VPN and then hop your way into the card data environment. That's no longer the case. They've pushed that requirement right to the edge of the card data environment. And I wouldn't be surprised if this requirement continues to get pushed closer and closer to your target system. So where you can MFA, multi-factor, to the card data environment and then move around the systems within the card data environment, the ultimate way to provide the best level of security is implement MFA on your target system. And the NIST framework also requires MFA, and there's other DFARS and GDPR and NERC-CIP, even though they might not explicitly call out MFA, they'll still require it because they'll reference back to NIST 800-171, or they'll say you need to apply industry best practices. And there's no way you can accomplish industry best practices without having something like this in place. So what's Zypro doing about it? So we've set the stage why this is important, how easy it is for attackers to use this against us, use passwords against us. What's Zypro doing about it? So one of our products, Zygate User Authentication, is bundled with the HPE Nonstop operating system. And this will provide you multi-factor authentication for your Nonstop server. So with logging into the operating system, logging into the platform, turn it on for every user. Nothing to buy. I'm not trying to sell you anything. You have it already. If you don't have it turned on, if you're not using it, let us know. We'd be more than happy to help you out, walk you through setting this up properly to make sure that your system, your platform is 100% protected, where passwords cannot be used against you to attack your system. And this will integrate with RSA Secure ID. You can also integrate it with Microsoft Active Directory, or you can extend this to other third-party authentication providers. But XUA's main focus is to extend Safeguard's capabilities. So not only will you get Active Directory and a lot of granular controls, which we'll talk about in a minute. For example, you can restrict access by IP address of who's logging into your system. You can restrict it by port. We've got time-based controls, so time of day, day of the week of days of the month, those types of things. Requesting programs, ancestor programs, and it's as flexible as you want it to be. So this is just skimming the surface of the types of granular controls available for you. But our main focus for this presentation is the multi-factor authentication, and not just for the operating system, but now we've extended that capability to your application, to your legacy applications. In most environments, legacy applications end up being the weakest link because they were implemented such a long time ago. They don't support modern authentication protocols. Their implementation is probably fragile, where people say, I don't want to touch it because I don't want to risk breaking anything. But they're core to your business. They're running your business. They're running your environment. They're processing transactions. They're doing what they do very, very well, but they're not secured, and they have access to the most critical data in most cases in your organization. So we work with a lot of our customers, we work with a lot of our partners to make sure that we can deliver the same multi-factor authentication functionality that you're used to for the operating system, and now extending it to your application. Our target market for this is Base24 Classic customers. So if you're using Base24 Classic and you need to extend MFA to your application, this is the solution for you. And we'll show you how that works in a minute. And we'll walk you through all of that setup. This also can extend to any custom applications you have. So we don't have to stop at just Base24. If you have custom applications in your environment that you need protected with this type of technology, where the user would log in with the username and password and they get prompted for an RSA token, for example, this is what will help you accomplish that. So on the left, you would get the typical Base24 pathway login screen. So this is when you're logging into Base24, you'll get the username and password screen. The user would typically type in their credentials, and off they go. With our new application authentication module for XUA, they would get prompted with this second screen. So they would put in their username and password like they normally would, and then they would get prompted with a second screen. asking them for their RSA token. So unless they can authenticate from the second screen, they're not going to be able to move on and log into the application. Now, this is customizable where we can allow some users to, or enable some users for this functionality and enable others to not have this functionality. So if you want to roll this out in phases, for example, to certain groups of users, you can, you've got that ability. But ultimately, the goal is to protect every single one of your application users with this type of technology, because you don't want a single compromised username and password to then sync your entire environment. So getting into the technicals a little bit, this is the types of settings that we would need to configure RSA Secure ID integration with XUA. We would need to know what the target IP address is of the RSA server, the port. There's some additional attributes and configuration settings, but all of this would end up in the UA-conf file, which then would enable you to communicate with RSA. It's a rather simple setup, and again, it can be rolled out in phases, so you don't have to do a big bang approach where you're rolling out to every single user. You can pick a group of users, pilot with them, make sure their workflow isn't disrupted, everything's working as expected, and then roll it out to another group of users. Sample configuration. This is a vanilla configuration of what it would look like. Again, you can roll this out to some users, you can enable it for some users and allow other users to just rely on their traditional Guardian user ID and password or their application user ID and password. And then the workflow of an architectural diagram of the workflow of how this would look like behind the scenes. So the login process would go as normal, and XUA would then take over. XUA would sit on your system as the SEEP, the security event exit process. So what it would do is essentially end up being your authentication process. So all authentication to the system would go through XUA acting as a marshal of where the next event should go. And then XUA would ultimately be the ruler saying, or have the enforcement capabilities to say, yes, log this user on, or no, deny access for this user. The beauty about XUA too is you're going to get all the visibility from all the audit, from all the authentication events that are coming into your system. So where traditionally, especially for encrypted connections, you wouldn't get visibility into the source IP address, for example. You'd see a loopback address, 127.0.0.1. With XUA enabled as your security event exit process, you will now be able to see the source IP address from that encrypted connection coming in your audit file. That can then be captured by Zygate Merged Audit, which is another one of the Zypro products that are available through the operating system, again for free, nothing to purchase. And then that can be sent off to your analytics tool. So then you can start getting real-time alerts and visibility into the authentication events happening on your system. That being said, I hope you found this presentation useful and informative. Again, the functionality that you've always been used to with XUA for the operating system can now be extended to your application. So your base 24 application or your custom application, if you want to integrate XUA with your applications and enable multi-factor authentication capabilities with your applications, let us know. Please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to help you out with that. With that being said, again, feel free to reach out, and thank you for your time.